Well, good morning, and welcome to another ElmLive for November 13th, 2016. So today we're going to be doing a bit more of a sophisticated animation and canvas-based example. This month for November, I've been streaming almost every single day thus far this month for Codevember and doing short little creative code challenges every day. A lot of you have tuned into those. So today we're going to do another creative coding exercise, a little bit longer than I've been doing on the weekdays, and use the Elm Graphics Canvas library and also get some animations in and kind of hopefully have some multiple layers going on in the animation today. So before we get to the code, let's get our daily dose of politics for the day. So if you've tuned into the last couple streams or caught up on the videos I posted yesterday, you'll know that I've been kind of struggling to figure out how to, I guess, balance what I want to talk about on the stream. As someone was commenting on one of the YouTube videos the other day, I do a lot of coding. I've been thinking about and learning about coding for a long time, constantly. And for me, politics is only something I have recently been taking much interest in at all. In the last 2 or 3 years, I've been doing more and more work around diversity and inclusion in tech. And in the last 3 or 4 months, I've been getting more interested in local politics and some of the national and international issues that are going on. And what I've been realizing is that, I am by no means an expert on politics or on international relations or the economy or anything like that. But I do think they are important issues that I want to talk about. So I'm trying to keep that in perspective. And what I want to do going forward with ElmLive is have a small amount of time reserved to talking about just my process of going through and learning things and what I'm finding out, kind of the approach I'm taking to try to learn and understand about what's going on, what role I can play in shaping those sorts of things. And then keeping most of it focused on the code as we've been doing. So that's going to be my plan going forward. So the topic I wanted to look at briefly today. And hey everybody in chat and Art Wealth. Good to see you, Mikey and Mystica Day. I don't remember if I've seen you in the chat before, but in any case, welcome everyone else and anyone else who's watching who's not in the chat. So the thing I wanted to look at today was lawsuits against the American president-elect, my president-elect Donald Trump. And it's a really interesting case in that he's highly unusual in the number of existing lawsuits against him, or not just him, but him and his businesses. That are going to be going on while he goes into office. So there's, I'll be posting some of the links in the video for you to look at on your own. But here's one of the first articles I found about 75 existing lawsuits against him. There's also a big Wikipedia page about legal affairs that he's been involved with throughout his life, not just current ones. So that's an interesting summary of all different sorts of things that are going on, a lot of them related to his real estate business, some related to sexual assault and rape, others related to things going on during the recent presidential campaign. And just for a comparison, I wanted to double check, all right, is this actually unusual, and how unusual is this for a presidential candidate, and at least put it into some actual perspective. So the Wikipedia, or the Google search for list of lawsuits against Donald Trump, you can find all kinds of articles, pages and pages of this stuff on basically all these different categories that are listed in the Wikipedia page. Let's see, here's a couple other of the articles. This one in The Atlantic has kind of a shorter summary of some of the different categories that he has been that he's had legal action taken against him on. So let's see. Moving on, I wanted to compare that, for example, to the list of lawsuits against Barack Obama. So this Google search is also kind of interesting. The first hit is actually talking about Freedom of Information Act lawsuits that were filed while Obama was in office, which went up a lot. I think this will be an interesting thing to look at during Donald Trump's presidency as well. The Freedom of Information Act lawsuits are in cases where someone wants to get access to information that is supposed to be public, but they aren't able to get it. They'll file one of these lawsuits. Then a bunch of these other hits. Actually, the second hit for Barack Obama lawsuits is actually the list of Trump's lawsuits. This one was kind of hard to understand what's going on in there. I'll leave that for you to look on your own. And then there's a bunch of articles about questioning Barack Obama's birth certificate, things like that. The only article I could really find that was listing lawsuits was this one from The Voice of Russia, SputnikNews.com, which has an article about Obama has so many lawsuits it would last until the 2016 election. And trying to read this, it's really only talking about one lawsuit that was filed by Rand Paul about the Fourth Amendment. So anyway, I'll put some of these links up for anyone who wants to dig into it. The other thing I was briefly looking at was the sexual misconduct allegations. So I wanted to put that into perspective with Bill Clinton. Again, Wikipedia seems to be a reasonable source of information for all this. So here's the page about Bill Clinton listing 3 specific cases: Juanita Broaddright, Paula Jones, and Kathleen Wiley. In comparison, here's the page about Donald Trump's sexual misconduct allegations. There are, let's see, I didn't even count these, but here's 13, 18, 20 of them listed here. And one thing I do want to mention is putting this in perspective, the effect that power has on the willingness of people to come forward and especially talk about sexual abuse and rape allegations. There's a couple interesting reactions here from different sides that you can read about on the Wikipedia page to try to put that into a social perspective. And yeah, here's a couple other articles that are just summarizing a lot of that. And oh yeah, this final one, I wanted to put that in perspective with other people in power. So I tried to find information about sexual assault allegations against Warren Buffett as an example of another billionaire, to look into if there's any merit related to the idea that, as Donald Trump has said about his sexual misconduct allegations, that it's just people that are like money-grabbing people that are trying to put down his name. So comparing to another person with extreme wealth, this was the only article I could find in this case. So the fact that Donald Trump has 20 people that have come out accusing him of sexual assault, and the only case in Warren Buffett's case is this one web page calling him a Satanist bankster, exposing him for human sacrifice. You can read this for yourself, but not a very evidence-packed article, in my opinion. And the final thing I wanted to note today was about what happens to these lawsuits now that Donald Trump is taking the office of President of the United States. So here's a couple notable Supreme Court rulings that are relevant. First one is Nixon versus Fitzgerald from 1982. And this case determined that government officials performing their federally appointed functions are immune from certain types of lawsuits. So this gives protection to the president and other government officials in the United States from being sued for certain acts. On the other side of things, there's Clinton versus Jones from 1997, where the Supreme Court ruled that the sitting president of the United States does not have immunity from civil litigation against him or her for acts that they did before taking office or for things that are unrelated to their role as president. So those are two interesting lawsuits to get familiar with if you're interested in understanding what might happen in relation to President of the United States, Donald Trump, and some of his past and future legal dealings. All right. So yeah, like I mentioned, I'm trying to make sense of a lot of this stuff myself and educate myself a bit more on politics and law and international issues. So I wanted to share just some of my journey in doing that, and I'll kind of be working through that in the coming year as we go forward. So if you have thoughts or feedback on how I can do that better or what you are interested in hearing about yourself, please let me know. Okay, so onward to our code for today. So I was inspired by two ideas that I've seen posted throughout Codevember today. The first one was this experiment that got retweeted by Sarah Drasner. And this was building an eyeball in SVG. Let's see. This code might have to be edited slightly. I have a plugin that prevents, let's see. Actually, let me see if I can open this in incognito. I have a plugin that prevents HTTPS pages from loading non-HTTPS resources. Oh, shoot. I should have tried this out before I started the stream. Yeah. Okay, this is actually the demo I wanted to show. So this CodePen, if it works for you on your computer, it just is basically a CSS and JavaScript implementation of this little animation, where it's like drawing a grid, drawing an eyeball, and tracing it and filling it in. So I don't want to really do that specifically, but I kind of liked the idea of drawing eyes. And a couple days ago, one of our viewers of ElmLive posted this example, which I thought was really cool. Sarai posted this. And yeah, this one actually works on here. So don't think she set out explicitly to make an eye, but when I saw this, I really liked the texture here and thought this looked a lot like the iris of an eye. So with those two things coming together, what I wanted to do today was try to make an eye animation in Canvas and have both like the shape and maybe like an eyelid animating up and down, and also using some kind of texture generated like this to be the iris of the eye as well. So with those goals, let's go ahead and jump into our code. And we're going to be using the Elm graphics package today. The reason being, we've used the Quartz render package fairly often in our past Codevember examples, but there are performance issues with that when you start to have a lot of elements on the screen because it uses SVG rather than Canvas. So in this particular case, like the Sarais example is built using a lot of line segments, and I guess mainly for that reason, I want to avoid using SVG to draw all these lines, because that I expect would have a pretty big performance impact. So we're going to use the Elm graphics package. All right, so let's get started. So I already have a folder that I've been using every day for Codevember this year for a Git repository. And while that's starting up, I'm going to make a new folder for day 13 today. And I'll just show you briefly what's in our Elm package.json. So these are all the packages that I've already installed with Elm package. And specifically today, I think we're going to be using Elm community easing functions, possibly Elm community random extra if we end up doing some random generation. And let's see, these are all installed by default. And Evan CZ Elm graphics and mgold Elm animation are the other two we're going to be using. So if you're starting a project from scratch, you can just, for example, do Elm package install with each of these names one by one and get them installed. All right, so to start out, I'm going to make a main.elm in our new folder, and we're going to have a main. What are we going to put in here? I think let's start out by just getting a circle up on the screen. So this graphics library is kind of old and hasn't really been updated in a while. So there's a little bit of kind of unnecessary boilerplate, in my opinion, on this. So all the shapes are going to be in this collage package, but then we take our collage and make an element, and we have to turn the element into HTML. So let's just see if we can make our view function. So I'm going to import collage, and I'm going to import element, and we will make a collage.collage. We'll give it a width and a height. We'll give it a list of forms. The forms come from filling or coloring shapes. So our shape is going to be collage.circle with a radius of 30, let's say. Then we're going to pipe that to collage.filled and give it a color. And we'll need to import color. And that should be our form. Then we'll end up with an element, and we'll need to take our element and turn it into HTML with element.toHTML. Okay, so that looks like it compiles. So now I'm going to start up, which I have installed via npm, and if you need that, it's npm install elm-live is the development server that we're going to be using. Then I'm going to run from the node modules folder the ElmLive server and run it with our day 13 main.elm file. All right. So there's our circle. Cool. So let's see. I kind of want to divide this into separate parts. And let's maybe get a visual reference up here of an eye. Okay, that seems good. Kind of a creepy search results page. So I'd like to kind of have the shape and then have the iris in the center and then the pupil. So let's see what we can do. So I think the iris, that'll be the iris part. So let's extract that. And the other thing I'd like to do is kind of have some uniform, what am I thinking? Some uniform grid system, I guess, defined. So rather than having 30, well, actually, I guess maybe we can make that a parameter. Let's do that. We'll give this a parameter called size, and then iris will be a function that takes a float and gives back a collage form. Cool. And then let's also draw a pupil, and the size for that will maybe be 10. So we'll have this also take a size and give us a collage.form. So I'm just kind of using circles for placeholders right now, and we'll come back later and make, in particular, the iris more sophisticated. And this will just be a collaged circle of the correct size, and we'll fill this one with color.black for now. Let's split these lines up. All right, and let's make this a little bit larger. There we go. Okay. So what's next? Next, I kind of want the shape of the eye and to have something like an eyelid as well. So here, I was researching this a bit earlier. And in the collage, there's a path, but there are no primitives for making curved paths. So what I think we're going to need to do is make a function that can generate a path of line segments based on some curve function. So I was looking up different ways to do that, and I think what'll be best for us is to use this quadratic Bezier curve, and there's a formula for it here. So this is a type of curve that has a start and an end point, and then has one control point that can kind of pull it up and down. So I want to try to implement this formula as a function that we can use to generate curves. So we're going to have this function called curve, which is going to take 3 points. And I guess we should have a type alias for point. And this will just be a tuple of floats. And this will give us back a list of points in the path. So this is going to be the start, control, and end. And for now it'll be empty. So what I want to draw on the top here is to make a collage.path with points that we get from our curve. And let's see. I think we need to, I'm not sure what the coordinate system is for the points within here, or if it's going to center it or something afterwards. So I'm going to try using positive and negative. So let's use negative 50. Comma 0 for our start point, and positive 50, 0 for our end point, and our control point is going to go up from that, because we want it to curve up. So let's have this at 0, negative 40. And then we'll have our path, and then we will collage dot, let's see, so what can we do with paths? We'll do collage dot traced. Okay. We need to give it a line style. What gives us a line style in here? Solid. Okay. Traced with collage dot solid with the color. Let's use brown. Okay, so let's just hard code something in here. This will be, I guess let's just put the start and the end point in to start with. Okay. And I'd like to make this line style thicker. So instead of using this, I'm just going to put our own line style in here. We'll have color.brown. The width will be 5. The line cap will be collage.flat, I guess. The join will be collage.smooth. And we have no dashes, and the dash offset doesn't matter. Okay. And I'm going to lighten up the pupil for the moment. Make it yellow. All right, so we've got our line in there. So now let's try to implement this curve. And actually, let's just stick the control point in for a moment so we can make sure that works. And I actually want that to be positive. We're going to do the top segment first. Okay, cool. So now let's implement this curve function and have it create one of these quadratic Bezier curves. So here's their formula. And let's see, so they get an x and a y, and these are both functions that take a t, and then p0 is the start point, p1 is the control point, and p2 is the end point. And let's change all of these to be variables instead of record access. And then we can destructure all these points. Start x, start y equals start. Control x, control y equals control. And end x and y equals end. Okay, and we can get rid of these semicolons. And I think I'm going to split each of these equations on the plus signs. There we go, like that. Stick parens around there. Okay. So within here we can produce x and y's given a t. So then what I want to do is just go from 0 to what? T has to be 1. Okay, so let's make 10 segments. Let's define this as well. So we'll have our n equals 10. So we'll go from 0 to n. And for each one, we are going to take that and give back x of I over n, comma y of I over n. Yeah, cool. There we go. We have our curve. And I guess we can just make n be a parameter too. So this is just going to be a float. I guess it needs to be an int. Huh. Oh, int. And that's interesting. So it wants it to be a float. I'm not sure what will happen if we pass fractional parameters in here. But this will tell us, this will just let us specify how many line segments. And if we want a smoother line, yeah, there we go. So with 20 line segments, that looks pretty smooth. Cool. So let's see. I guess the other thing I'd like to do is we need this to not just be a line, but to actually make a shape. So I think we can make a polygon and have two curves. So let's try this. Let's make two of these curves. And this one will go higher. Yeah, maybe even higher than that. Okay, so what I want to do is try to take these two curves and turn them into a single shape that we render. So to do that, we're going to make a collage.polygon, and I think we can just make these two curves and join them together. And then we can collage.filled with color.brown. And that should hopefully replace these. So we have a flat part. I'm going to guess that that is because one of these is backward. Like we start from one end and go to the other, and then we need to start at the end that we just got to and go back to the first end. Otherwise the polygon rendering won't work properly. So I guess we can just fix that by flipping the left and right sides. Cool. Yeah, there we go. So there's our eyelid. And let's also add one for the bottom. So that'll just flip the negative sign here. Cool. And then I want to put this all in a function. So I'm going to pull that code and we'll call this eyelids. And I want to parameterize the size of this, I guess. And I guess the 50 is what needs to be the size for now. So eyelids is going to take a float and give back a collage form. And we'll have a collage.group, which will contain these two things. And that is 50. Cool. So now we should be able to control all these variables. We can make that bigger. I guess actually the eyelids needs another parameter, which is going to be the size of the vertical size, I guess. So this should be called width. And our height is going to be another float. Let's put the height first, actually. And I want this to kind of be in terms of the iris size. So I think these 40s will become height plus 10. And the 70s will become height plus 40. And let's see, what did I mess up here? Oh, I missed extra parentheses. Oops. Okay, there we go. So now if we change the iris size to, let's say, 50, and then we'll need to make this bigger too. Alright, so I want to make this whole thing bigger overall. So let's make the iris around 100, maybe 120. Then we'll bump these up. And this will be maybe 200. And I guess what's interesting is the control points need to be farther out than this. So this actually is not getting things to be the right size. Interesting. So these parameters aren't really working out that great. So I'm just going to play with this a little bit. Yeah, so I guess I'm not quite sure how to interpret these control points, which is actually a problem with Bezier curves in general, because the control points don't correspond to anything that's directly on the shape. And like here, when we try to scale the shape, the control points have to scale in a different way. In any case, let's see. Let's try just writing these in terms of width then. And the width here is going to be, let's see, if we divide that by 2. Yeah, so let's multiply this like by, whoops, I meant 0.7. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Oh, yeah. And then this one needs to be times 1.2 or something. There we go. Okay, and then maybe we can just make these say height. and we really want this value to be 120. So then we need to bump all of these up. There we go. Okay. 2 and 1.2. Okay. So let's see if this will change more appropriately with the height. 80. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So I guess to control the control points, we just need to make them multiples of the height. All right. Cool. So, let's take a short break here, and we've got a couple things we can do when we come back. One is adding animation to the eyelids. Another would be adding some random generation to some of the parameters of this eye. And a third is making a more sophisticated iris shape. Or shape, I guess it's going to be a circle, but a more sophisticated iris shading. So if you have a preference on which of those we do first, the animations, the randomness, or the more complicated pattern rendering for the iris, let me know in the chat. And we will be back in just 2 or 3 minutes. I'm going to grab some more water.